Well, there's lots going on in Canadian politics and public policy in this country, so we've assembled our The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly panel to discuss what's happening. Tristin Hopper joins us from the National Post and Kris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Thank you both for taking a few minutes to chat with us about some stories in the news. First of all, the biggest one, I think, is the World Cup. It's come to Canada, Toronto, Vancouver. It's cost taxpayers, according to the federal government, about $1.1 billion for various costs, a big chunk of that for security. Kris, I'm going to come to you on this one. What is your take? Is it worth this? Is it worth the $1 billion that we're spending? Are we getting enough of an economic benefit to justify it?
No, it's a crazy waste of money. Our colleague Carson Binda, who is the BC director of the Taxpayers Federation, he crunched a bunch of the numbers, and it's astonishing. Apparently, the average ticket for some like C-level game, I'm not up on football, soccer, but apparently it isn't even like big league teams that are playing in Vancouver. The average ticket price is $3,000 each. So taxpayers are on the hook for it, but the average taxpayer, there's no way in heck that they're going to be able to afford that. I worked out the number. Like if you're talking about $1 billion here, we could otherwise have put 3 million kids through soccer camp this summer instead of what we're spending on this.
That's huge. You know, I don't follow it too closely either, but you might raise some eyebrows there, Kris, by saying some of these countries aren't big league. They don't have big league teams. I'll let you handle
The ones in Vancouver,
apparently
not. Soccer nerds tell me that the ones in Vancouver are not the big ones. So
the junior circuit. Tristin, over to you. What's your sense on this? Is it worth the
well,
the $1 billion?
I have to avoid Vancouver for the next few weeks, to get away from all the soccer people. One nice thing about the World Cup, and this isn't an endorsement of the $1 billion we spent on it, but it is keeping all the troublemakers indoors. I've noticed it's a lot nicer at the grocery store and stuff. All the loud people are inside screaming at their soccer screens. So there is, there's an upside to that. However, on top, it is a shocking quantity of money. I still can't get over for the number of games we held, and sort of like not even top tier games, for a World Cup that is going to be remembered as the American World Cup. So I think the Americans think they're getting money for value for money, because this is their 250th birthday, and the main games are in the United States, and you're having all these sort of touching instances of Europeans are coming to the United States and realizing they should never have hated it the whole time. I'm failing to see any kind of cultural or even economic upside from the Canadian perspective. So basically, FIFA. Am I allowed to call them evil? Am I allowed to even say FIFA without getting us sued on this show? But anyway, it's one of the most undisputed sort of evil international organizations shows up and says, well, you can hold, I don't know, Curacao versus, East Venezuela, in Vancouver for hundreds of millions of dollars for your particular city. And I'm sure politicians would point to, well, they're renting out hotel rooms and stuff, but I think with $1 billion, such an unbelievably high figure for a handful of games, I don't think there's any way. And these hotels would have been filled otherwise. It's the summer in Canada. These are tourist cities. In many cases, I think you could actually get a perverse result in which you're actually getting diminished tourist activity because people are avoiding these cities because they're worried about all the World Cup traffic. I can't back that up. But I generally think, local politicians, when they start talking about let's host an Olympics, let's host this game, there should just be a trap door that opens underneath them, because it's just your classic municipal government. Let's look like we're doing something grand. I'll get to get my name put on a plaque. I go to the Commonwealth Games pool here in Victoria. There's still a big plaque with the pictures, with the names of all the politicians who were in office at the time when the 1994 Commonwealth Games came to Victoria. And there are rare examples if you hold one of these and it actually is value for money. Everybody remembers it. It brings the community together. And at the end of it, you say, well, I paid, $100 extra in taxes, but I kind of liked that, it was 1994. We got all these games coming here to Victoria. But most of the time, it's just a mind-blowing waste of money. So I tried to think of notes that was going to be different. Obviously, Ms. Sims was not going to like it, Canadian Taxpayers Federation. But it's mind-blowing how much we've spent on games no one will remember.
They've
It seems
canceled
very
the
hard to
Dragon Boat
justify.
Festival in Vancouver as a result of FIFA.
There you go.
So go figure for
Yeah,
tourism.
so local
Jesus.
culture shelved for Curacao versus whatever. I don't know the team. The
Get
teams are.
your pitchforks and your torches now. When we come back, I got an interesting issue that Kris has been all over. We'll be back in just a moment. And we're back on 2nd Street chatting with the good, the bad, and the ugly panel, talking about different things that are coming up in Canadian politics. Kris, I mentioned before the break a story you've been all over, this e-scooter expense issue, where it seems like Alberta politicians provincially want to be able to expense trips using e-scooters going from A to B for work. Am I explaining the issue carefully enough, or is there a nuance there that I'm missing?
No, there's no nuance. You're explaining it very well, and it's super stupid. So an MLA makes well over $100,000 per year if he or she wants to take a zippy little ride on an e-scooter. I have a really radical idea. They should pay for it themselves. I know this is extreme. I know the politicians are used to having, dawn to dusk paid for them by taxpayers, but we can't afford this. Like, we're clocking in at over $100 billion worth of debt here in Alberta. Taxpayers are tapped out. If an MLA really in their heart of hearts wants to commute on an e-scooter, and if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. They can spend the money themselves, their own money. Quit dinging taxpayers for every single little thing.
Let me ask you this. Is it that they want to commute from their house to the legislature using these, or from let's say from the legislature to go and meet someone in a building, whatever, downtown for a meeting? Why do they want to use these things?
In the first instance, that's absurd. In the second instance, pay for it yourself. So no MLA is going to be commuting in from their house into the legislature in Edmonton. I'm just picturing them on the Deerfoot, right? Like the tie flapping behind them, holding the briefcase in their teeth as they go. Like, that's not happening. And if they're just taking a little hop ride on an e-scooter in downtown Edmonton for some reason, pay for it yourself. Dig deep, folks. Dig deep into your own wallet and spend your own money. If they try nailing taxpayers with this, Colin, I'm going to lose it. They better not. They need to kill this idea.
Okay. Tristin, let me pull you in. What's your take on this? Is it reasonable?
Well, I guess the counter. So if I could have someone in the room to defend this policy, they'd probably say something.
Please do.
If otherwise, I would be driving to this appointment in my lifted F-350, as any Albertan would do for a small city commute. And they say, well, rather than expensing, because they are able to expense automobile expenses, as is true with a variety of workplaces, including my own, rather than doing that, this incentivizes me to take the cheaper, smaller, greener option. Although I would also point out, you could take a bicycle, you could walk, you could use your legs, or maybe you don't have the use of your legs. There's other things. Anyway, it's just what stands out to me is just sort of the cultural mindset of someone who would be using the e-scooter and would think it's BS that I had to pay, $3.50 for this ride. Why isn't somebody else picking up the tab? Very recently, I was invited to an event in Ottawa. I was flown out, my expenses recovered. I had to get to the airport, 5 hours before my flight took off. Conceivably, I could have rented a hotel room and expensed my host for the 3 hours I was sleeping. And that just, cosmically didn't strike me as good. So I just slept on a bench until the plane took off. Maybe not a great idea in hindsight, but I have an inherent mistrust of anyone who feels they have to, particularly when they chose this position. They have immense quantities of power. They are a public servant. I'm sure they love the name public servant. I know Canadian Taxpayers Federation doesn't use the word public servant as you call them bureaucrats, but they probably use it. Public servant, and you'd think the least you can do is, as you're flying through the city of Edmonton on your e-scooter, drunk on your own self-importance, the least you can do is think, well, I'm saving the environment and the taxpayer by paying for this e-scooter ride with my own $3.50. So of your many priorities as an MLA, it strikes me as suspicious that that's even made the agenda. It's sort of like you're going to your mom's house and you're having your mom over for dinner. And the whole time you're just sort of, you're keeping track of how much she's eating. She had 3 glasses of wine. When I go to her house, I got to get 3 glasses of wine, or, it's got to be 50-50 type thing. So I don't know. I don't trust any politician who could stand up in public and say this. They should be laughed at and humiliated and, potentially have Miss Sims lose it. I don't know what that would entail.
No one wants to face her wrath. When we come back, I want to talk to you guys about some research that our think tank dug up about Canadians paying for tourist healthcare when they come to this country. We'll be back in just a moment. And we're back on 2nd Street talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly in Canadian politics, chatting with Kris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and Tristin Hopper from the National Post. I want to ask you guys about some research that our organization, secondstreet.org, dug up. We talked to a former bureaucrat in the healthcare sector, and she said, you guys got to look into this. We've got cases where people are coming to Canada, they're non-residents, they're getting healthcare services, they're being given bills, and they're not paying them. So they head back to their home country or whatever. They're not paying their bills, and Canadian taxpayers are getting stuck with the bill. BC, we found over the last 5 years, $200 million has been charged to taxpayers and written off because the government just simply can't get the money from these people. Next door in Alberta, it's half that, about $92 million. So we're talking about thousands of hip and knee operations. When we looked at this issue, we thought about one possible solution, and that might be to require people coming to Canada for a trip to have travel insurance before they come. And then that way, Canadian taxpayers are not getting stuck with the bill. Tristin, I'll start with you first this time. Do you think that's a reasonable solution to this issue?
This is one of many problems that have sort of come up with temporary migrants or people coming into the country and basically exploiting the system in any number of ways. And I will hear these sort of small scale solutions like, well, maybe when they come in, we keep having terrorists enter the country. We should have like a form in triplicate. And are you really a terrorist? And, there's all these particular checks we could put at the border. I think a lot of these solutions can be fixed with just a tighter hand, not only on immigration numbers, but just who is getting into the country. I mean, this is cropping up in the wake of the greatest temporary migration surge in our history, and it's not even close. I mean, between 2021 and 2024, you essentially have 3 million temporary migrants, so whether it's asylum seekers, international students, temporary foreign workers entering the country. And we still don't know how many of them are here, even if some of their visas are expiring because we don't count exits. So, I mean, I think if you just the sheer number of people you're getting in, you overwhelmed the screening systems. So all the usual checks wasn't there. So now we're seeing all of the consequences. And I see this as one of the consequences. One of the consequences is we've got the Bishnoi gang in multiple cities now. We basically, created an entire extortion gang composed entirely of people who had entered during this particular migration surge. And one of the consequences is you have people exploiting our healthcare system and then skipping the country when they've gotten their healthcare done. So we can talk about, should we make them have health insurance? Should we have these little checks? I mean, maybe in this particular case, that's a pretty easy thing to check if someone has health insurance. But I think generally, you would avoid a lot of these tertiary consequences if you didn't just have wide open borders, or at least wider than they've ever been in our history.
Well, Kris, let me come to you and I'll just clarify. I mean, in many cases, these are tourists, people coming to, see Canada or, maybe here for business trip, whatever. It's not that they're immigrating to the country, but, hey, why would I pay this bill? I'm back home. I don't have to, pay it. They're not going to come after me. Kris, what do you think? Any solutions come to mind on your end?
It's a good question, and the numbers are outstanding. So great work, again, at secondstreet.org. So the amount of money is alarming. The question is how to enforce it, right? So if we get some kid up here with his dad going hunting, and he's from Utah, and he falls out of the tree and breaks his arm, don't know how good it's going to look if we've got him at the emergency room saying, no, go away, Skippy. You know, we can't help you in your 12-year-old broken arm. But there must be a way for us to be able to recoup this up front. Like, I know most responsible people, when they cross the border into the United States, they'd be pretty scared about getting a healthcare bill, right? So they pay for health insurance for themselves when they cross the border. So yeah, maybe the solution is to have some way of showing that they have insurance coverage. The question there, though, Colin, as always, is we would need to make sure that this wasn't like an ArriveCAN level government solution, because they're just going to wind up wasting even more money than we'd save.
Yeah. Well, listen, we got more data coming for the rest of the country, but yeah.
I'm reminded of an iconic moment in Canadian history. So the Klondike Gold Rush, this is 1898, they find gold in the Yukon. So you have tens of thousands of American miners going to the Yukon, and the government at the time said, they're going to go there, they're not going to realize the intensity of the conditions, we're going to have just Americans starving to death, and then they're going to ask us for relief. So famously, you couldn't get over the Chilkoot Trail unless you had 1 ton of personal supplies to ensure that you would be safe in the Yukon. So I think clearly we have deviated from that mindset in a number of ways. The idea that you enter Canada, you can take care of yourself.
And we're back on Second Street, talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly in Canadian politics. Before the break, I mentioned that there's this issue that's arisen. It's actually in the Yukon, where on social media they've attracted some attention because these Yukon hospitals have started to set aside parking spots for the elderly if you are Aboriginal, so First Nations, Inuit, and so forth. And, you know, there's a great debate happening. People saying, oh, this is wonderful, it's part of reconciliation. The other side saying, no, this is racist. You shouldn't be allowing people parking spots based on their race, especially the government. Kris, any thoughts on this?
Well, I'll take off my Taxpayers Federation hat for a minute, because I do host my own show. Sure. And I interviewed Chief Aaron Pete, who is outstanding. He's actually a member and a chief of a First Nation right where I grew up in Hope, British Columbia. Lawyer, smart young guy. And he pointed out that he was completely opposed, for example, to the Senate's committee attempt to criminalize basically discussion around things like residential schools. And he, as a First Nations leader, chief, saying, well, you can go ahead and put me in jail then, because I'm not going to quit talking about this. And to paraphrase him, he basically pointed out that exactly nobody from these communities is pushing for this stuff. Like, they're not asking for this kind of stuff. They're asking for things like discussion, right? Open talking about things like this. And just from experience, where I grew up in the Fraser Canyon outside of Yale, this only causes more hurt feelings and more division. And I've heard exactly 0 First Nations elders saying, yeah, give me preferential hospital parking, like none. And we speak with folks who are members of First Nations bands all the time at the Taxpayers Federation, because they want the same thing we do. They want things like accountable government. So I don't know where this idea is coming from, but we're not hearing a big clamor for something like this.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of the Deep South in the United States years ago, where you had, you know, separate entrances for Black people. Like, I don't know, separating people out on race, it certainly seems controversial. Tristin, what's your take on this?
Well, it's weird here because, I mean, often there are exceptions, but often when you see, you've certainly seen sort of, you know, woke politics start to get into racial divisions like that. But, you know, in the United States, at least you can argue, well, it's a return to the 1960s. It's just sort of this, you know, bizarro inverse Jim Crow. But Canada, we often don't have, well, actually, we do have in the case of Indigenous people, but often, I mean, this legacy of sort of racial segregation, it really wasn't as intense here in Canada. Yukon's a bit different in this particular case. So often when you see these types of cases, where we're going to have an Indigenous only policy, it's somewhere in Ontario, and it's, you know, a bunch of guilty white women named Sheila sort of thought this would be something that would make them feel good at a particular meeting. This is a bit different in that this was Whitehorse hospitals. The Yukon is 25% Indigenous. This particular hospital was like 1/3. So it's slightly different in that this isn't just some totem to a mystery Indigenous elder who may or may not show up to this particular Brampton hospital at some other point, and it's just there to make people feel guilty. So it's slightly different from in Vancouver, all those unpronounceable names they put on things that not even Indigenous people can pronounce them because they're in some obscure academic phonetic dialects. That is just sort of an FU. We're putting up this name. It's an Indigenous name. You can't pronounce it. Oh, make an issue of it. So this is a bit different than that. But still, I would say, and I think similar to what Ms. Sims was saying, I think this would be also an uncontroversial opinion among Indigenous circles. When you start categorizing people by identity, I mean, you get special treatment, even if it's just one parking space. It's one parking space at 3 hospitals. I once rolled my eyes at the idea of the slippery slope, but oh my gosh, it has been very slippery these last few years. So look at in the justice system, we figured out in the 1990s we're going to have differential treatment for Indigenous offenders. The Gladue principles, this came from the 1990s, so this is a very old concept. When an Indigenous offender comes before us, we're going to give them different sentencing. And then hopefully that gets them out of the wheels of justice. And then this, was expanded into let's give differential sentencing to people who are non-citizens, people who are Black, people who have any sort of system of oppression. And I would be hard pressed to find anybody who doesn't think that's a disaster.
All right. Can't say I disagree with you guys on this one. We got to wrap it up here, but as always, thanks for helping us dissect what's going on.
Thank you.
As always, there's lots to talk about in Canadian politics. If you have feedback, you can send us an email at ideas@thenewsforum.ca. And as always, thank you for tuning in. We hope you'll consider watching again next week.